First-time homebuyers facing some of the toughest conditions in decades, with the median age of new buyers rising to about 40 years old, even as high prices, elevated mortgage rates, and scarce starter home inventory push affordability out of reach for so many. Meanwhile, a new proposal from the Trump administration is sparking debate about home affordability. A 50-year mortgage, that's the proposal. Together, the pieces paint a picture of a housing market where entry is increasingly difficult and policy solutions offer relief only with significant long-term consequences. So let's try to make some sense of all of this with Metro Atlanta financial expert Andrew Poulos. Good to see you, Andrew.
Cheryl, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. I'm trying to wrap my head around this 50-year mortgage, especially if you're starting at age 40. You do the math and it's like, wow, okay? So when we're looking at today's housing market, what's the single biggest barrier facing especially first-time home buyers?
Well, we've got unaffordability with rising home prices, and we've got wages that aren't keeping up. So when you combine those two, it makes perfect sense where the average first-time home buyer age is moving up to 40 years of age versus a few years ago. Last year, it was around 38 years of age, right? But the unaffordability is the core issue here that needs to be addressed, and a 50-year loan is not the solution. I mean, when I saw that that was proposed by President Trump, I almost fell out of my chair last week.
You know, you talked about that 40-year-old average, age for a first-time buyer. That's really significant because you think about the 20 years prior to that. So that's somebody who's starting a career, perhaps starting a family, trying to pay very high rental prices while socking away a little bit for a home. You know, a home is really a key when you talk about cycle breaking or generational wealth. So the impact for this is way beyond just, owning a house.
Absolutely. And look, the proposed 50-year mortgage loan by the Trump administration is so that someone can be able to to bypass the barrier of entry to be able to get into a home when they may not necessarily be able to afford a 30-year. I've run the numbers, so let me just give you just a very quick analysis on a $500,000 loan, which is probably the average cost in Metro Atlanta for a house, a decent house, $500,000. If you do the numbers on a 50-year loan, if you were to keep that loan and you're still alive at the end of that time frame, you would have to turn that $500,000 into over $1.92 million that the bank would have received in interest, right? That's absurd at this point. I mean, if you can't afford a home on a 30-year loan, you're certainly not going to be able to afford it on a 50-year, because the difference in the monthly payment is probably somewhere around $300, give or take. And listen, when you're a homeowner, you got to be able to budget for property taxes increasing, your insurance is going to increase, that dishwasher, the refrigerator at some point are going to need to be replaced. So in my opinion, if someone, regardless of age, if someone can't afford a home on a 30-year, 50 years is not going to make any difference. You might as well just be a renter until you could afford a house pretty much and be sustainable.
Those numbers say it all. You're talking about paying 4 times more than something's worth because you're stretching it out over so long. That long-term vision really important as we're talking through affordability. What do you think needs to change for the market to finally open up, not just to first-time buyers, to be manageable for the greatest number of people in general?
Look, I think there's a few things. First and foremost, obviously, interest rates are having an impact on all of us, right? Whether you're a first-time home buyer, you're someone who already owns a home who's looking to refinance. So as interest rates begin to come down further, hopefully in 2026, that will have a positive impact. But overall, Cheryl, we've got to take into consideration that about 19 trillion of real estate in this country is held by boomers. So baby boomers are sitting roughly on about 42% of all real estate, and they're not willing to sell those assets. One of the reasons that many boomers don't sell it is obviously they pass it on to the beneficiaries, but they don't want to sell it because of the tax implications. So if we get creative and we have tax legislation that will incentivize maybe some boomers who would like to sell their assets, but just don't want to take the big tax hit and give the money to the government, that would potentially free up a lot of real estate, right? So there's ways that you can craft tax policies and favorable tax legislation that would bring more inventory to the market, and that would bring affordability to the market as well.
All right, complex, and it touches all of us in some way. Andrew, always appreciate the time. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.